Okay, it is exactly 8:30 p.m., Tuesday, November 27th. Welcome to week 4 of Introduction to Criminal Law, and we are officially in the second half, and I hope that you did well during the first half of the course. You took the exam last week. I haven't checked those because I'm in the process of completing your week 2 grading, which was actually due by over the weekend, but we had these storms and I had some power failures, so um, uh, it's been pretty tough here. So I will get those out to you no later than tomorrow, and I already did the discussion post, so you will receive those grades for week 2, and then I'll begin working on week 3. So let's go ahead and get started. Let me share my screen here. Okay, and you know about the requirements. Make sure you satisfy the APA. I say it all the time. Make sure you conduct research. I say it all the time. And so I'm going to go down. You got all these great resources that we've provided for you. Recording for week 4 will be down here at the end of this lecture. Oops, I didn't want to go to the welcome announcement. Let's go less that. Let's go back to week 4. Okay, for week 4, crimes against government and public order. So for the last couple of weeks, we've had crimes against persons, crimes against property. So now, crimes against government and public order. And you would read chapter 8 of the text. I provided to you the PowerPoints for that as well. And then domestic terrorism, we're going to talk about that, obstruction of justice, resisting arrest, fleeing, police disorderly conduct, and free speech. Then you can use the key terms, which I just go over just to show you again. For practice, the free speech or disorderly conduct, and then practice quiz. And then your discussion assignment, which initial posts are due tonight, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. Obstruction of justice. Your reply post is due Saturday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. And then finally your written assignment, fleeing or eluding police. We'll go over that, the requirements for that in just a minute. And then if you could take the time to complete the mid-quarter student survey, I would greatly appreciate that if you could complete that by the end of the week. And then remind you about my motto, adversity is a springboard to success. You know what that's all about because I covered that during week 1. So let's get to course calendar. Quarter's moving along. We'll be in December. This is where we are this week. The reading assignment, of course, is right there as well. Your initial post, your live lecture, your reply post, and then your written assignment is due, and then also, of course, your live lecture, the key word that I give you at the end. And then you'll see next week we'll be in week 5, and then we'll have one more to go, and that'll be it. Quarter will be over pretty fast. All right, so let's close that down. Okay, let's go to the module itself. Very briefly, going over the assignments. Remember to utilize the resource that we provide for you, the Justice Studies for Criminal Law. and it helps you very well. So now, this is a two-part assignment, and part one, you're given a scenario, and then review the police pursuit policy, and then the Supreme Court case of Brower versus County of Inyo. Make sure that you supply the full citation when you cite this paper, 2 pages at a minimum, and then you're going to deal with each of these questions. Make sure that you include a reference page and APA citations and the cover sheet, okay? And then your flyer, it tells you what you need to do, review the sample statute, and then in your flyer explain the elements that must be proven, and then it tells you 2, what to do, 3, 4, and then there's a template that you can use to help you get going. All right? So, again, you'll see how I grade this assignment. Again, some of you keep leaving out citations in the body of the paper, and you're losing 5 points right off the bat. Some of you don't cover the length of the paper. You'll cover 1 page rather than 2 pages, or whatever the number of pages that are required. This paper is due this Sunday at 11:59 p.m. Here is the rubric. Again, to get 15 points, you're going to do this and satisfy the 2-page minimum requirement. Paragraphs, make sure you run your papers through Grammarly so that you don't get hit with a Grammarly hit. Citations and references, do not use Wikipedia. Just about a few students have used that and lost 5 points right off the bat because I have stressed, and it's even mentioned by name, and so you're going to lose 5 points every time you do that. Explain the elements of the statute in the flyer and so forth. You'll get 15 points. So you want to do both parts. Very important. And then, should be no doubt about the assignments. I reiterate, the rubric is so important. I reiterate satisfying the requirements that are asked for in the rubric, which match what's in the module. Very, very, very important. Your discussion post, I'm not going to go over that, but you know how that works. Your live lecture, your keyword is due Sunday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard. And then please take time, if you could, to complete the mid-quarter student survey. If you were to click on it and then hit begin, then you can do it. Let us know how we're doing, and try to do everything we can to make this better for you, if you for the next 2 weeks after that, and then for those who hopefully will find themselves in situations where they don't have to come back here again to this course. All right. So now let's go back. And let's go into what I want to talk about. Let's go back to the lessons content. So the content of the chapter, again, starts out with the objectives, which, crimes against the government and public order, laws pertain to obstruction of justice, resisting and fleeing, and free speech and disorderly conduct. Okay. So we're going to talk about each of these here, and then I'm going to just briefly show you how to do this. Make sure you do the practice quiz. The practice quiz helps you prepare for the exam. Remember, your next exam quiz that will be coming up is really like a final. Will be during week 6. Okay. So domestic terrorism. Domestic terrorism. Now, when it says domestic terrorism, first of all, we're talking about things that take place within the boundaries of the United States. And so with domestic terrorism, we have the FBI involved. We have Homeland Security, which was actually created in 2001 after the September the 11th bombing of the World Trade Center. And since that time, there has been terrorism that takes place throughout the country. And notice what terrorism is. It says it's the unlawful use of violence against persons or property to intimidate or coerce the government. And so what it is, the objective is to intimidate the government. Yes, it results in crimes, but it usually involves mass killings, such as bombings, like the World Trade Center, like the Oklahoma City bombing, like the Boston Marathon bombing, like the shootings now that are taking place where you see mass shootings, and those are done in the name of some government. I'm not talking about some lone wolf guy who just went off and started shooting. I'm talking about organizations that claim that they are doing this, such as ISIS or any organization outside the United States. And it takes place very much now in our country, so much to the point that there are steps that are taken to protect us. You have to go through metal detectors. You can end up on a watch list if you're involved in certain activities. Of course, though, we have seen some domestic terrorism being foiled. For example, the sending out of those bombs recently to the senators, to CNN, and to anybody that were in opposition to the president. Now, that some people might say, is that fit within the definition? Well, it does, because it's to intimidate civilian population. It's to tamper with the rights of individuals, such as the free press or the right to disagree with a person of another political party or take a different political position than you. So that's what terrorism is. It's very violent. Now, international terrorism involves the same kind of thing, but it occurs outside the United States soil, and that can take place in the form of violating the criminal laws of any state, in the jurisdictions of the United States as well, and that the purpose, again, threefold: to intimidate or coerce a civilian population, influence the policy of a government, or affect the conduct of government by mass destruction, assassination, or kidnapping. So that happens outside of the United States, and you've seen that happen in England. You saw it happen in some other countries where poison was poisonous powders and bombs and things of that nature take place outside the United States. But what does the United States have to do with that? Because of the fact that the United States recognizes that we don't operate in a vacuum, and that we have to take a position on international terrorism. So I already talked about domestic terrorism and I talked about a few examples, and I also covered that completely. So domestic terrorism, again, is investigated by the federal government, and they work together with the local authorities to determine what those crimes are. Okay. So then we get to obstruction of justice. So obstruction of justice can come from intentionally misleading the police or withholding information. Now, the whole issue of obstruction of justice generally doesn't involve accidental, but it generally involves knowingly, or we call it scienter or mens rea, means that you purposed in your mind to withhold that information, such as not filing your correct information on your tax returns, lying under oath before a court or before the government when there's an investigation going on, such as you notice that there are a number of people who have gone to jail relating to the Mueller investigation of Russia tampering with the 2016 elections, and that there are a number of people who have gone to jail or been indicted or charged. And so it ends up with an indictment in court, and then if you plead guilty or found guilty, you can go to the penitentiary. But the key thing, perjury, that is telling a lie under oath. Now, I have said this before, that one of the things that is very, very, very important that takes place with a person who goes in to testify, that you take an oath to tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. But it can apply to also law enforcement as well, or individuals who testify, any person, any individual, when we're talking about during the formal criminal proceedings. And then we get to obstruction of justice on the streets, when people mislead the police, or if the police provide false information. Now, let's go back to when a person misleads the police, such as the Fifth Amendment says that a person doesn't have to talk. But if a person does begin to talk, they have to answer the questions. So, in other words, if you start to talk, if you want to remain silent, like, for example, there are some jurisdictions that say you have to provide your identification. And you can be found guilty of obstruction of justice in those jurisdictions. However, as far as making statements at that time, that would violate your Fifth Amendment rights. So let's talk about what the state of Kansas has, such as interfering with law enforcement. A particular person commits a crime when they give false and intending the officer agencies to act in reliance upon that information. Okay, that's lying. The officer, or that the law enforcement officer has committed a crime or misconduct in the performance of their duties, such as providing false reports, such as maybe even going beyond the use of force. But the key thing is that, and this happens in our jurisdiction right now, and those of you who are familiar with the Laquan McDonald conviction of a police officer here in Chicago, now there is a new trial that's taking place as I speak of the police officers who prepared reports that appears as if they were colluding to obstruct justice by providing false reports. And they are actually being tried for that on the obstruction of justice basis. Any information that such information is false, intending to impede or obstruct an officer or an agency's duty, hiding the death of a person, if you have knowledge about disappearance or potential death of a child under the age of 13, and you lie about it, concealing or materially altering evidence, and that's been done in criminal cases. It's been done by forensic people. It's been done by police and other individuals. Knowingly obstructing, resisting, or opposing any person authorized by law to serve process. So in other words, hiding someone out or those kinds of things, or messing with or bothering the individual who's trying to do that. So anyway, this is, I'm not going to go over this, but you can read this on your own. But so you get the idea of obstruction of justice. Notice what Ohio has in the statute. The person is committing or has committed or is about to commit the offense, a criminal offense. The person witnessed any of the following: offense of violence that would be a felony, a felony offense that results in creates substantial risk or serious harm to another, attempt to conspire, that is to cover up stuff like as what I was talking about earlier, or any of the things listed above. So now, anybody in Ohio has engaged or witnessed the actions outlined above must identify themselves when requested by a police officer. A person who fails to disclose his or her information, that is name, address, and birth, can be arrested for a misdemeanor offense. Now, again, there could be a challenge to that with the Fifth Amendment incrimination. So I haven't seen any cases to that effect, but that is one of the things that jump out automatically because it seems to conflict with that. But it says here, though, to cover that, I think there was an attempt to cover that by saying there's nothing in the statute that requires the individual to answer questions or provide information beyond their personal information. So in other words, produce ID. And so, again, you know, the stop and frisk laws, which Terry versus Ohio allows police to temporarily stop an individual to frisk them, pat down type search, stop them very briefly, but not based on probable cause, it's based on reasonable suspicion. So look at temporary questioning in Wisconsin, demand the name of a person. However, no specific provision exists which compels a person to identify themselves. So you don't have to identify yourself, but failing to identify can be a factor that the police consider, but merely refusing to identify is not specifically prohibited within the statute like it is in Ohio. So the police in Wisconsin, it says, must use more investigative prowess to get the name of the individual. So anyway, Wisconsin case law does not permit the police to conduct an exterior pat down and minimal intrusion to remove wallet of a person. You can't do that. Individuals can comply with the so-called failure to ID laws by either providing identification or saying what their name is. That is all. Just their name. Not identifying oneself is similar to obstructing. Okay? So there's a good little link here that you can look at that asks you to check to see, do you have to give out your name? And then you do not enjoy a constitutional right to refuse to reveal their name when asked by a law enforcement officer. You can take a look at these decisions and cases. So now we get into resisting arrest. When is a person under arrest? I have stated before, and I'll state again, that a person is under arrest when they are not free to go. You don't even have to use the words arrest. But if the liberty of that individual is taken away, then that person is considered under arrest. So when the police or law enforcement person um, does not cooperate during the arrest, that is, um, um, the person will find themselves in a situation where they could be charged with resisting arrest, such as coming down to fighting or struggling with the police, those kind of things. Arrest can either be explicit, by you're under arrest, and then the person's under arrest. Implicit is basically what I said earlier, when individuals believe that they are not free to leave, and so therefore they are under arrest. So it's determined by a case-by-case basis. Police officers says must be mindful of whether or not a person is under arrest, because if they are under arrest, you cannot ask them a question without giving them a Miranda, because any statements that they give without the Miranda when they're under arrest or in custodial can be suppressed by a motion to suppress in violation of the Fifth Amendment or the Miranda warnings. Resisting arrest can take place in form of assaulting toward police, such as punching or kicking, to resist the tension that the officer feels when he or she tries to place a person under arrest. So resisting, stop, frisk, halt, arrest, search, outlaws, resisting by stating this is Tennessee, is an offense or a misdemeanor for a person to intentionally prevent or obstruct anyone known to be a law enforcement officer from effectuating a stop, frisk, halt, arrest, or search of any person, including defendant, by using force against the law enforcement officer. But if a person in Tennessee uses a deadly weapon to resist, the nature of the offense is increased to a Class A misdemeanor. So that's resisting arrest. The bottom line is generally it's not the words, it's more the action of the individual. All right? What do we say? Cooperate with the police, deal with the situation in court. Fleeing police. And you know what that is? When a person takes off and drives away, run away, attempts to get away, and all states require that the individuals be charged with fleeing the police and can prohibit them from fleeing from the police in a vehicle. And so the vehicle pursuit is probably the most dangerous situation. Now, be aware of this. If an individual is fleeing from the police have to be very careful about the amount of force they use. For example, if the individual is simply running, they don't have a weapon, or either appear to be a danger or immediate threat to anyone, then excessive force cannot be used. But let's talk about in the vehicle pursuit, because the vehicle pursuit issue is something that creates several problems. It presents a problem to the individual who is being pursued. It provides dangers to individuals who are innocent, who might be in the area. And so a person fleeing a person in a police in a vehicle commits generally a felony. So it says here, a person of unlawful fleeing in a motor vehicle in the third degree when knowing that they've been directed to stop by an armed uniformed police officer, or by the activation of lights, or they attempt to flee such officer in such vehicle, find themselves in a situation where they could be charged with a crime. Okay, During the pursuit, driving, uh, police have to consider the time of the day, the volume of traffic, the nature of the offense, weather, road speeds, and the officer's driving ability. There are what we call police pursuit policies in place, which you will be covering in your written assignment. But these pursuit policies provide things that police officers must do when they're in a pursuit because of the fact that they can hurt individuals that are innocent. And these police pursuit policies have resulted in death of individuals that are innocent. It has resulted in death of police officers and resulted in astronomical civil suits that adversely affect the governmental entity. But it says once a vehicle pursuit is in progress, the police must keep due regard factors in mind, and that's what we talked about earlier, such as the time of day and these things right here. So police can use other tactics to stop the vehicle, such as force to stop, induce to stop. There are some techniques such as the ones we're talking about here, ramming the fleeing vehicle. Now, there are techniques that they use for that, which we're going to go into more detail. Roadblocks. There are also spikes and things that are placed on the road so that if a person does pursue and they run over them, then they will get flat tires. And then the policies are laid out here and above. And then be sure you check this Scott versus Harris case. It's the United States Supreme Court case which deals with techniques that police officers use. And I remember we studied these years ago, the pursuit intervention techniques, and what it really basically did was to try to show you how to stop the individual with little or no force to the vehicle, providing obstruction, and I'm not going to go over those. So those techniques are utilized to stop individuals when they're driving and fleeing. Again, it's a very dangerous thing, and these techniques are given to help. So PIT is one. I'll just show you the next one. Stop sticks, I was talking about that earlier. Partial roadblocks. Boxing in, that's where the police cars are all around them. And then the PIT techniques. Okay, stop sticks, okay. So that's them, all right. So now let's get to free speech and disorderly conduct. Well, first of all, yes, you have a First Amendment to says that freedom of speech, peaceful assembly, religion, press, but there's a balance that takes place with these rights and maintaining order. And sometimes there's a fine line, but dealing with First Amendment free speech protects some speech, but not all of it. So it says here in our section here, to maintain peaceful and safe society, some forms of speech are not permissible or have been outlawed, such as speech to inflame someone, likely to cause a physical confrontation, or what we consider in the legal terms fighting words that came out of a U.S. Constitution case. And disorderly conduct or the breach of the peace prohibits the use of obscenities, profane, boisterous language that is likely to cause a breach of peace. Now, disorderly conduct comes about in a number of ways. If it's done when the police ask you to cease, however, generally using obscenities, if it's not aimed at an individual and their face, you can express, like somebody said, F the pigs or F the police or something like that, but they're not talking to the police, then that's different. That's different. But the key thing is that there is a balance, and it's determined on a case-by-case basis. Every person who maliciously or willfully disturbs the peace, quiet of a neighborhood, family, or an individual, a loud or unusual noise, by threatening, traducing, quarreling, challenging the fight, fires any weapons, of course, uses vulgar, profane, or indecent language within the presence of the hearing of children, can find themselves with a misdemeanor of disorderly conduct. Okay. And I'm not going to go into this video, but you can take time to look at that video on your own. Okay. And so that's pretty much what I want to say to you. I do want to remind you to use these key terms, use these practice tools at the bottom that have been prepared for you to help you to perform well throughout this course. And the flashcards is the best method. You just run Adobe Flash, allow it if you're in. And so deliberately misleading police or withholding information that prevents government from effectively and efficiently investigating police matters. And you should remember that one. Obstruction of justice. Custody that is very clear and leaves little room for error or misrepresentation is use of physical force to resist lawful arrest. Occurs when a person has willfully been untruthful. Perjury. Law prohibits the use of obscenities, profane, voice language likely to cause a breach of peace. Let's go back to that. Flip the card. There we go. That's perjury. And then you go to the next one. So you could do those and go through, and they will help you to prepare for the exam that's going to be coming up. Good way to study and get an understanding about what's taking place in the modules. At any time, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me for clarification on some of the things that you look at. Free speech, you can do the same thing here. There's a little scenario that you go through, and it'll give you a scenario. Man walking in the middle of the street in a busy downtown entertainment district yelling profanities. Is this considered free speech or disorderly conduct? Let's see if it's disorderly. Yep. The man used vulgar in a public place and his action would likely create a breach of peace. Abortion activists are standing on a street corner holding signs of aborted fetuses that some citizens cite as offensive. It is free speech or disorderly conduct? It's definitely free speech. Okay. Finally, Edward is watching a movie with some friends inside a theater that is half full. I know where this is going, and I know where it came from. Edward says to his friend, "Watch this," and yells, "Fire," causing 10 patrons to run out of the theater. One patron calls police and complains. This is definitely not free speech. You cannot do that. You can't, let's see, yell fire in a crowded theater. That is from the case of, I'll tell you in 1 second. Give me a minute. Let me pull it up here. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater because of what it will do. Yeah, the Shank case. That's what I thought it was. The Shank case, which is which is, but it was later overturned by Brandenburg versus Ohio, which gave limited. But that's where that came from. Okay. Yeah, the good old Shank case. I thought that was it. Okay. One more. Animal protesters are standing on the sidewalk holding signs of abused cattle, save the cows. Now you know the same thing would hold for abortion as for this. Yes. Animal protesters place themselves arm in arm across the main entrance and prevent cattle trucks. This is probably not free speech because you're impeding the progress of someone else. So it is disorderly conduct, and it's designed to create a breach of the peace. Okay, so those are the kinds of things that will help you to make sure that you get the information. And then, finally, and again, very, extremely valuable. Did you hear me when I say that? The practice quiz. A local resident suspected of setting off a truck bomb at a religious temple, intentionally targeting the parishioners. This is an example of eco-terrorism, domestic terrorism, international terrorism, or state. So probably domestic because it happened locally. Yep. A foreign national living in your community is part of a terrorist organization, blows up City Hall. This is an example of international, well, it could be domestic terrorism, but it might be considered international. Domestic terrorism is carried by terrorists. Okay, so then that's why I said another country. So then in that case, then it is. Okay, so if there's another country involved. You stop a man that you believe was about to break into a store, but stopped when he saw your marked squad car. You question him, and he lies about his name. What will you place him under arrest for? Obstruction. Remember, he's not under oath, so it's obstruction of justice. And then you go on. Okay. A police officer testifying under oath about an arrest, lies about reasonable suspicion. What criminal law has the police officer violated? Under oath. So obstruction, which is the strongest? This is it. Perjury. Okay. Okay. And so that's it. And so I want to give you a key word, and the key word is free speech. That's it. So you give me that, and you get your points. All right, so that's it. So again, I will be finishing up your grading of your assignments very shortly, as soon as I finish here this evening, and you'll have your grades from week 2, and then I'll begin working on week 3s after that. Any questions, feel free to reach out to me. So I'm going to say good night at this time.